Hey there fellow creators, Ben here from Cinderblock Studios, and some time ago I did a video review for the Liquitex acrylic spray paint. I really love this stuff, but one thing that can happen when you use these cans is if you clog the cap and you don't really recognize it at first, you can actually clog the pin mechanism in the can, making the can pretty much unusable. So, to prevent that from happening, usually you clean your caps, you take care of your caps, you clean things, hold them upside down, spray, but sometimes that can still happen. And if you have some of this stuff and happen to have some cans lying around that you've essentially ruined, I'm going to show you a way to clean that nozzle and bring these cans back to life. Stick around. So, as I just said in the introduction, the little pin mechanism in these cans can clog. They're known to do it. It has nothing to do with just the product being inferior. It actually has a lot to do with just the formulation of the paint. It's just something that's going to happen. I've learned over the years that once the can gets to the point where this happens, usually because it's my fault because I didn't shake the can enough in the first place, or I'm trying to do weird things with techniques that literally are causing the caps to clog. So occasionally it happens for me. Now this can is it has maybe that much paint left in it, about a quarter-ish, but it is clogged, and though I do have another can sort of ready to go, I'm like, you know what, I want to clean this and be able to use the rest of the paint and not just throw away 3/4 of the paint because I paid money for this. So in order to do this, we're going to need some tools. The first thing we're going to need is, quite obviously, a clean cap. Throw away whatever cap you were using in it, shake this can up for the 2 minutes that you should in the first place, and get a fresh cap. If you don't have a fresh cap, you can buy extras. I usually have a bunch. Next up, you'll need another product from Liquitex for their spray paint specifically, and that is the cap cleaner. Now, this stuff I use on a regular basis while I'm using these paints in the first place. I will tilt the can upside down, spray to clear it, and then spray for about 2 or 3 seconds with the cap cleaner. Gets out the rest of that paint that's in there, and then I will also end up throwing the cap in a little container of either mineral spirits or rubbing alcohol, depending on what I feel like throwing in there at the time. So I tend to try to get the most life out of my caps, but again, sometimes stuff like this happens. So you want the cap cleaner and you want a cap. Another thing that you don't necessarily need if you have the cap cleaner, but I recommend it, and you're going to see me go back and forth between the two as a cleaning mechanism, is some isopropyl alcohol. Now, I've done videos in the past about how this stuff can be used to clean acrylic off of things that you wouldn't normally expect to be able to, like brushes that paint's dried into. I find that these two together in alternating batches really helps clear up the dried paint on the can. Now, you're also going to need some sort of metal scribe or stylus, preferably not a new one because you're going to be picking away at the can with this thing. This is going to be doing most of the work. So if you have a new one, be prepared to more or less ruin it by doing this. Now I actually use these, they're the tips of old darts, so there'd be a little plastic thing that screw in here and the feathers. I have a bunch of these because we had a dartboard when I was growing up, and the darts would always break, but the tips were obviously still fine, so I have a bunch of them that act as little scribes, and this is what I'll be using for the bulk of my cleaning today. And the last thing that you're going to need, well, you don't need it, but I do highly recommend it, and that is a pair of nitrile gloves, or latex, but nitrile tend to work a little bit better in the grand scheme of things, and people are allergic to latex. So yeah, you're going to want rubber gloves, for sure, absolutely. You'll see why as we go, but this is going to dirty the hell out of your hands, and if you get this spray paint on your hands, it's probably going to be on your hands for a couple of days. So if you don't want to explain to people why your hands are black or whatever color you happen to be using, then you might want to get a pair of gloves. And sort of the last part of this, but not necessarily something you need, is you want to do this either in a well-ventilated space or just outside, and preferably over top of a trash can, because in order to do this, we're going to be ejecting a lot of paint and propellant from the can just to clean it. So it's going to stink up the room. Also, the cap cleaner has some chemicals in it that don't smell real great inside, but if you have no other options, get ready to, be huffing these fumes for the rest of your evening or morning or afternoon or whenever you're doing this. That said, that's what you need to do this. Again, it's just some people might say, well, it's just cheaper to buy a new can. And it might be if you need to buy all this other stuff. But in the long run, I can do this for 10 minutes and bring the can back to life rather than spending an extra, $10 on more cans. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so now that we have a trash can, some light, and 2 cans, a little bit of patience, we're going to go ahead and start trying to do this. So the real thing here is just to be able to dissolve the paint that's now trapped in this nozzle. So I just start with the cap cleaner. And just start getting it kind of moist and wet. Because I really want to get that into that nozzle. Then you can take the pen or your stylus. Now never, ever, ever insert this with this pointing up. You will get a blast of this in the face. You never, never want to do that. So that's why we do this over a trash can. So we kind of have to do it by feel. And I'm kind of scraping back and forth as well as pushing slightly, and I'm already getting covered in paint. And just because you can push that pin down doesn't mean you've now cleaned it. You got to really work around circles, back to back, back and forth, because you're trying to get out the dried paint, not just access the wet stuff. The cap doesn't have a big point like this. It has it's basically a miniature straw that punctures that pin. So just because you can do this does not necessarily mean it's clean. So there'll be a lot of back and forth like that. And actually, probably should have gotten a rag here too. And the cap cleaner. And I'll do this a few times, remembering to point it downward. And if you end up doing this a lot, you kind of start to recognize exactly when that feels clean. Now, as I'm working, as I mentioned, I like to switch between that and some isopropyl. So I'll just kind of pour that into the whole top of that and let it completely envelop right where that little well is in the center, where the pin is, and just kind of let that sit for a little bit. And depending on how clogged it is and how stubborn it ends up being, will really depend on how long you have to let that sit. And again, you don't necessarily have to have a cap cleaner. You can probably just do this with the isopropyl, but I find that the cap cleaner, especially since it is formulated to do this, kind of helps the process quite a bit. Probably pretty close. Yeah, this is why you wear gloves. Imagine if this was like purple or something. Why are your hands purple? Okay. Now once you feel like you've gotten pretty close, I'm actually going to give it one more hit with the cap cleaner. And then I'm going to let that sit for a minute. Kind of clean the can off a little. And we want to make sure we're still keeping this shaking. Now when I started with this can, I was getting like barely any spritz out of this, just a couple of little spots. Now you want to take the can or the cap off of the cleaner and then give it a test. That's pretty good. Looks like it's coming right back to life. Now I'm probably going to go ahead and let this sit a little bit longer, probably overnight, with some, let's get the rest of that cleaning off of the cap cleaner. Now this can actually is being relatively stubborn, so I am going to go ahead and put that extra bit of the isopropyl in. And I'm going to go ahead and probably just let this sit overnight. But as you can see, just doing that little bit of pick work, I was able to get all of, all of that paint back in there. Now I can get the caps to work again. But if you're doing this a lot, you're going to notice that these pins will clog up, especially if the caps start clogging up and then clogging the pins up. But you can bring them back to life in a similar way that you could kind of bring your brushes back to life with a little patience and a little bit of solvent. So with our stylus covered in paint now, that's why you don't use a new one, and our solvents finished for the day, we can take our gloves off, have nice clean hands, enjoy living in the trash can with all that paint, and know that we can once again now use the can in our artwork. So that's about it for this little video slash tutorial slash tip. I don't even know how to classify this one. But if you're having trouble with specifically using the Liquitex spray paint and having the pin mechanism clog, this is a way to save it. It's a simple, easy to do thing. Again, just kind of need the right tools for it. But you can bring that can back to life, take care of your caps, take care of your cans, and you'll thank me down the road. So that's just about it for today. Thanks guys for watching. Hit the like button if you learned anything. Get subscribed if you're not already. Check my social stuff out. Links in the description box below, as well as my art on my own website. And this has been Snipit Studios, and I will see you guys next time. Keep on creating. I forgot to say that. Really close. Yeah.